the conversation, Shauna and I, a few weeks back, less had happened in the world and in our community. And the approach that we talked about at that time just didn't seem realistic and or fair. So we changed it up just a little bit. I'd like to first start off by saying that I hope this is a sacred space, and I hope it is a safe space, because some of the things that I'll be sharing aren't necessarily things that I've shared in a public forum before. So I just ask that people be patient and listen and open. And so we'll get started. Trauma. Being Black in America equals trauma, period. From cradle to grave, it just is. And it's something that we deal with. Anyone that is slightly tan to, you know, Superman hair black, that's just our world. I'm reminded daily that I am a Black woman. Before I get fat, before I get curly hair, before I get brown eyes, I get Black. So what does that mean? I don't shop at JCPenney's because I got tired of being followed around. I've had to call the manager twice in Michael's because I was carded using my debit. You know, that's the one where you put in your numbers and they want to card me, but don't card the person before me or after me, and they don't look like me. I've been asked if my children were my children. For those of you who don't know me, Nikaniki is kind of a giveaway. My ex-husband is extremely Nordic looking, like down to the green eyes. So my children, one of whom is what we call white passing. The Hispanic side of my family, we call him Wedo. So anybody who knows what that means gets it. So is there a difference being a therapist and working in the therapy room with my traumas, your traumas, those traumas? Yes. But I'd like to explain how the Black experience traumas come up in various situations. So one of the first things that I learned being a young child was that we were different. I grew up in the Bay Area in San Jose, and I don't think I saw a ghetto actually until I moved to Redding. That just wasn't something, it was a word that wasn't really used in my house, nor was the N-word. If we were in trouble, we might get the N-word thrown at us in a certain way, like your full name, that kind of thing. Growing up in my first home, there was a pool at the end of the street, and it was a gated pool, and we never, ever used it. And we'd ask all the time, why can't we just go down to the pool? My parents grew up in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and they are Vietnam era folks. They also were there during the Little Rock Nine over at Central High School. So they lived that experience, and as far as they were concerned, there was no reason to talk about it. It was something that was just known. So in the little things that are said and have been said, like on a daily basis, I get all the time, wow, you sure talk good for a Black girl. I'm 53 years old. Don't tell anybody, please. So to call me girl is one insult, but is there another way I'm supposed to speak? Or, wow, you sure are smart. Okay, thank you. I did skip a grade. I was usually the only Black kid in most of my experiences. So I get a lot of, wow, you people sure have pretty teeth. So what am I supposed to take from that? Right now I'm being singled out because there's the you people, and then, but it's a compliment, but it's kind of not. So there were a few things that in the past couple of weeks when Shauna and I first started talking about this, I just started writing things down. And I just wanted to show, I wanted to talk about and explain our side of the experience, because I think that people see, I need water. I think people see and hear us talking, and there are those who are sympathetic. And for those of you who have reached out to me in the last couple of months to check on me, thank you very much. But I think oftentimes the inside of the experience is so different. So first of all, pro-Black does not mean anti-white. So if I say Black Lives Matter, what I'd like you to hear is two also. So as soon as you say to me, well, blue lives matter, yeah, they've always mattered. Will all lives matter? No, that's not what I'm seeing in my neighborhood. So I'm glad that one of the people here is gonna know this next story. Every day when I leave my house, as I pull out of my driveway, I watch my garage door come down to make sure that if there's something written on it, I see it. Why is that a big deal? Why would I do that? Why am I paranoid? Why am I bringing that in? Because when the swastikas were written on our car and the N-words were written on our cars, none of my neighbors checked on us. Not one. We didn't even notice it until about 11 o'clock in the morning. I was so embarrassed because I didn't want my neighbors to see this, right? Because that comes from this whole shame thing that we have, especially the Southern way. And it just so happened I had a meeting with someone that afternoon and I'd forgotten about it. And he called to find out where I was and what was going on. And I told him, you know, I'm sorry, I forgot. I just came out and there's swastikas on our car. And he's an amazing person. And he came over and basically comforted me and waited with me for the police. So that is why I check my garage door, I check my front door, and I check my walkway when I pull out of my house. So that's what my trauma, part of what my trauma looks like. Those of you know me, I have 3 children, 2 of whom were born at the same time and they were 9 pounds each. And I had them at home because I was afraid to go to the hospital because I know how we're treated. And I knew from stories that I'd heard from other people of color here in Redding, or Shasta, Tucky, I call it sometimes. But I knew how we were treated. One of my girlfriends was nursing her baby not long after birth. And one of the next shift nurse came in and asked if she was the wet nurse. Mercy Medical Center. So there's things that go on and things that are said to us and about us on a daily basis that you may not necessarily hear or even be a part of. I've gotten the angry Black woman. I just walked in the room and said hi. I've gotten the, well, you probably expect to, in reference to money or social programs. First day of nursing school, Chico State, girl in front of me turns around and says, so how did you get in? Was it affirmative action? Nah, chick, I went to school, did my homework, got good grades. This is our existence. So understand when I say that, when Shauna and I talked, part of what I wanted to do, if you know me, I'm like, oh, I gotta go do some research and I've gotta watch some more stuff and I gotta know some facts. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I can't watch anymore right now. As you can tell, it's hard for me to speak right now because it's so personal and so painful. So I want to talk a little bit about traditions and how our traditions work and how sometimes they're looked at as odd and or weird. First of all, don't cut the baby's hair before they're 2. Boys or girls, and a lot of folks, I didn't cut my kids' hair until they were almost 5, but you don't cut the baby's hair, it's bad luck. And a lot of Black folks still do that. By the way, I prefer Black. Or you can just call me and say it's time to eat cheesecake and I'm in. There are lots of little, I guess the word right now is dog whistles. A lot of the dog whistles that go on or that are stated such as, well, I'm all for it, but as soon as you say but, that tells me I'm not safe. Well, I've never seen anything like that. Or it's just, well, my family's the same exact way. As soon as you say that, I'm not safe, and I will shut down, and our conversation is pretty much over. Does it mean feel sorry for me? No, not at all in any way, shape, or form. But just understand that aside from the car fires of the world and the pandemics of the world, I'm still the big black lady now with the mask. And that is how I'm seen and perceived before I open my mouth. So I can call someplace and use my special telephone voice. Do you have a such and such? And yeah, okay, can I come pick it up? Yes. I've gone to places and they tell me, oh, we don't have any. Well, I just called a little while ago. No, I don't know. We don't have that. Well, I can see my name right there, Nikaniki. Oh, I didn't expect you to look the way you do. Or I didn't expect you. So for a very long time, I've lived in Reading since 1986. For a very long time, I didn't see it as the black girl thing. It wasn't until about 10 years ago that I started going, you know, I did the same exact thing in school. We do group assignments. All of us turned in the same paper. I would get a B minus, everybody else got an A. You tell me. So when we get into the therapeutic environment, one of the things that's really interesting to me is, for those of you who don't know me, I see everyone, but I'm kind of the kid whisperer, and I see a lot of children, adolescents, and teens. And whenever there's a foster care situation and I get an email or a phone call, oh, I think you'll really, really do well with this kid. Generally, I'm like, they must be black. And oftentimes they are, and that's not the big deal. But when I get the kids, first of all, I have to move past the I'm just another worker lady and then get into the real. So I'll ask things like, so how you doing with your hair? And immediately they're like, oh my gosh, the lady doesn't buy me anything and I don't think she knows. Do you have lotion? No. Okay. Why is that important? We take really, really good care of our skin, which is why we look really, really young. Like I'm actually 73. I told you 53 because, you know. Part of that skin is our scalp. Our skin tends to be drier because of the extra melanin. And so we use products that oil. So whereas most people who are non-people of color, Caucasian, Latinos to a certain degree, you wash out the oils most of the time. We add it back in. So daily, I take a bottle of something that looks like olive oil and I go between the parts. Right now, I found some good stuff, smells like peaches. When I was a kid, I was teased about that. You don't wash your hair. Ew, gross. And I'm like, why would I dry my skin out every day? That's disgusting. I need the moisture. So all of these little, we can call it biases, we can call microaggressions, all of these things add up to my experience is different. It is different when there's a big fire in my community and I may have to go rent a place because I don't look like everybody else. And right off the bat, you know, I drive the big nice car, so I must be a drug dealer. Or I must have done something. How did you get there? I still get that question. So how did you do it? And I have to pause. Well, what do you mean? Like because I talk so much, or because I have curly hair? What are we talking about here? So in terms of the scribbling that I've been doing all week, every time something would come up, what I came up with was my experience is just different, and it is who I am. But as I said, on a daily basis, I'm reminded that I'm different than the big mass. And it's part of who I am. It's part of why I'm proud of who I am, because I do stand out a little bit in this community. But it also can be a really scary thing, because when you see the homeless guy on the street and he's a brother, I'm like, hey, what's up? You need something? Doesn't bother me a bit. The two white guys walking towards me scare the snot out of me. Because I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. They find my people hanging from trees in Orange County in 2020. And if that doesn't scare a person, I don't know what would. Look at this call. There's 4 of us. And that's like really big turnout for a wedding event. That's humongous. And then right off the bat, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know who that young lady is. I gotta write down her name, because that is part of our thing, is we find each other, because we were kept apart. We could not gather in groups larger than 3. Our language was taken. A lot of our customs and traditions were taken. And then there was the whole thing with people like Sally Hemings, which I was gonna talk about. For those of you who have seen Hamilton, there is a brief nod about Sally Heming. And if you don't know who she is, I'll tell you the scene. Jefferson gets a letter, and one of the girls, he's in his purple suit, and one of the girls walks up and he says, "Thank you, Sally." And if you don't know who she is, then it's something fun and interesting to research. Also, the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. A lot of our medical technology today, like July 2020, is because this woman had these amazing, incredibly destructive, but wonderful cells, cancer cells that grew and grew and grew. And this was a lady back in the 50s, and she passed away, and her cells are still alive today. They are at Johns Hopkins, and her family has never been compensated, nor has there ever been a recognition that they used part of her body, nor did they ever have permission. So in looking at my world today, when Shauna first contacted me and said, the first thing she said was, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "I'm good." And she's like, "With all that's going on?" And I'm like, "Okay, try not to cry." It's a lot. But when we talked, her questions were, what can I do? How can I help? What difference can I make? And I'm like, I don't know. Again, my first thought is, you got any cheesecake? But other than that, let's do something different, and let's include people from our community, as I said, that we know and we can trust. And so when I tell you, yeah, I get weirded out going to the mall. I don't shop at Victoria's Secret here. I'll go to other Victoria's Secrets in other cities. I don't buy cars here because of how I've been treated in the past and things I've seen. So it gets to a point where, you know, if a lot of people tend to isolate and feel very, very alone. So I'm just asking, I guess, in terms of competency, in terms of humility, understand when my girlfriend came to my house one Christmas and she turned to me and she said, "Why are all of your ornaments Black people?" I don't even know how to answer that question. What do you mean? "Well, your husband's white. There's nothing in here that represents him." I said, "Turn on the TV and open the front door. Are you kidding me?" And besides that, I would wait at Mervyn's until after Christmas and everything was 70% off and nobody bought the Black ornaments. I bought them all. But that's what this culture is like and about. And so I thought it was very interesting that in my entire house, that's all she saw was, "Oh, well, I'm being excluded." She happens to be Caucasian. He's being excluded. And I'm like, wow, this one little tiny place, this 2,500 square feet, on the tree. Wow. And so that's what I hear when people say some of the things I've seen on Facebook. Black people don't care when other Black people kill them. Actually, when there's a crime committed, you can ask anybody else on this call who is a person of color. When there is a crime committed, the first thing is, please don't let him be Black. Please don't let him. Oh, Lord, 2 of them are Black. Okay. Because then I have to explain, what about those guys that did that? What about the slave owners that were actually Black? You know, there's a lot of those Africans sold the other Africans. Yes, but not into slavery for the next 4 to 6 to 8 to 1,000 years. But why do I have to explain that? And how is it okay to even ask me to explain that? I have been fired from jobs for being too aloof, for being too direct. And the person next to me, who's not Black, said a couple things that actually hurt everybody's feelings and people left crying. They're okay. And so I think the biggest challenge and issue right now in this country, in this community as well, is what do we do? Just listen. So all I ask is that you listen, which for us therapists is like the very first thing we're taught, just to listen. Because sometimes I'm whining and moaning simply to get it out. And I can guarantee you, most of the time, I don't necessarily, and I'll let the other speakers speak to this, I don't necessarily expect anything to be done, mainly because for so long it hasn't been. So other than that, oh, one more thing. This has come up a few times in my practice, and so I thought I'd bring it up tonight. White people adopting Black kids. I don't have a problem with that. If you want to adopt as many children of many different colors as you want, please do their hair. If you don't know how to do their hair, I am on Psychology Today. You can text me, call me, skywrite. I don't care. Please do not. Angelina Jolie's baby, I don't understand, because she has money and her child's hair looks crazy all the time. But that, for us, hair is the crowning glory. Do not touch our hair. And it may seem crazy, but I've had numbers of people just touch my hair. The best is when I'm in an elevator and someone behind me touches it. I don't know where your hands have been, for one. One lady, she actually took my hair and pulled it a little and said, oh, it's so soft. So I reached out and grabbed part of her body, and then that's a whole nother discussion. The fact that there are children in the world who need adopting, and they are adopted is great. We parent differently. So just so that said, we parent differently. And so when it comes to parenting, we have a whole different expectation of our children, especially if those of you have any type of Southern background or Southern parents, you can probably relate to this. So you're not gonna see our children, like I saw in Trader Joe's a couple weeks ago, running up and down the aisle. That's just not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Our children don't talk back to us, at least a second or third time. In general, the expectation, it's not so much seen and not heard, but there is a respect level. So when I have a little miniature person who comes to my office and they say, well, Rhonda, and I say, well, that's Miss Rhonda. My mother would have a little pink cow baby if she knew they were calling me by my first name. And it's because of the age difference. But there is a respect that we inundate our children with from a very, very young age. And we don't necessarily see that in other cultures. And I can tell you, I've had clients who are like astounded. You know, I'll have like this white lady come in with their little adopted Black kid, and I'm like, so this is my style, and this is what I do, and this and that. Well, then he doesn't have an opinion. No, he's throwing things, and he got kicked out of school. Why are we giving him an opinion? and I have to pull back and go, okay, wait, there's parent Rhonda and there's therapist Rhonda, and how do we approach this? But yes, we have a completely different way of understanding and looking at children. And I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's all that I have.
I was wondering, do you mind if I ask you a question, Rhonda?
No, let me get water. I'm so dry.
So first of all, thank you for sharing your own personal experiences of what it's like to live here. I know what that takes to talk about your own personal stuff. Sometimes that's the harder thing than talking about, you know, clinical stuff. But when you were talking, I was reminded actually, and she commented, Josie gave you a little yup down here on the chat. And Josie and Eddie and I were talking about this a little bit at the Beloved Community Board meeting earlier this week. And Josie, I'm sorry for speaking for you. If you want to unmute, you are more than welcome to. But she was talking about that various experiences as a therapist of being believed. Her various experiences being with a therapist, of either being believed and having those experiences believed, or being dismissed. And I was just thinking about that as a clinician, like, you know, what Josie said, which I think was really great, was that, you know, sometimes therapists just want to like reframe right away, but that can be really dismissive for people. And it can really come across as maybe not being like believed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do it, girl.
Absolutely. I just, in my own experience, just when I'm telling you, the way he said, sure, I bet to you, felt like, you know, if I'm recounting an experience to my therapist and they're saying, oh, well, maybe he just meant this, or maybe he meant that. And I do always want to try to believe the best in people, or believe that they're well-intentioned. But it hit me funny, so I'm sharing that with you, and I just need some validation. And I know that therapists want to reframe things for people, and that people need things reframed sometimes. But in those instances where it's like, okay, that hit me funny, I think that was about race. I don't know what that was. It is nice to be like, you know what, to hear the validation of you know, go with your gut. If you thought that maybe that was like a microaggression, then it probably was. You know, to hear that from somebody is just so empowering and beneficial. And I think that is a component of anti-racism. If we're talking about anti-racism within the mental health field, I think that being able to validate people's experiences is a huge part of that. So, yeah.
I want to dovetail off of that. Thank you, Miss Josie. In the being believed as the therapist, because of so many experiences in my life where I'm like the only one in the room who knows what's up, and I've got my hand up or I've spoken up, and being either dismissed or completely walked over in various situations in life, just not feeling heard. Oftentimes I think, especially when I first started, it's like, I want to over explain so that you'll believe me, because I really do know what I'm talking about. Because if I don't over explain or explain enough, and I hold back a little bit, then I'm aloof and I'm unapproachable. And, you know, at this point I've got both resting bitch face and basically menopause mustache all sitting right here. So I've got to be aware of my body language and how my face looks and the whole 9 yards. And then I got to a point where it's like, you know, they came to me for a reason, so I'm going to let that go. But yeah, therapy experiences, my own marriage therapy. I had a therapist, when I walked in the room, say, oh, you're Black. I didn't know you're Black. Okay, what is that? Well, that just changes things. Changes what? And it just was, now, if people mess up all the time, I've probably messed up 12 times today. If my youngest son was here, he would explain exactly how and when. The thing is that's the point where you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that out loud. I just, you know, the picture in my head was not of a multicultural relationship or not a blah, 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 blah. I haven't seen a whole lot of Black folks around here, and I'm so excited that you're here. Please, something. But what I got instead was this really weird, uneasy feeling. And again, reminded that I'm the only Black girl in the room. I kind of know that. When I walk in and I see all these people who don't look like me, I already know. So let me point it out if I choose to. But in the therapeutic situations where it does come up, and it's come up recently with several of my kids because of the pandemic and because of what they see and hear on television with the Black Lives Matter stuff. Validation is the biggest thing. It's like, yeah, it's different, huh? Do you know about this? Do you understand about that resource? Do you know, has anyone spoken to you about this or that? But I want to give two resources that I look to often. I found the world of podcasts thanks to Miss Heather Jordan. I listen to NPR's Code Switch. I like it, it's fun. It's young people, and some of the things that they come up with keep me hip so I don't look like, you know, my mama. And also Latino USA. There was a really good one on the other day with this composer has taken West Side Story and redone it for 2020. And I was like in the car trying to get to work, doing my, you know, samba in the car with the guy sitting at the light next to me was like, there's another one. The other symbols, another symbol that I see all the time as I was thinking that, the big, huge flags on the big trucks. That tells me I'm not welcome. That tells me that I'm glad that my V8 can move very quickly in corners well. So I don't care if it's American flag, I don't care if it's Confederate. You have a big flag on your big lifted truck, that tells me Klan, go the other way, and most likely, unless I'm recording it, nobody's gonna believe me because we can record it and it's still, you didn't see all of it. We didn't know what happened afterwards. They must have been doing something wrong to begin with. If they would just listen, you know, if you're not breaking the law, the police don't mess with you. So, okay, you've got me talking again, I'll stop. There's other speakers. Anything else?
What was the second, you said Code Switch, what was the other resource you said?
Latino USA. That's all.
USA. I was trying to put the links in the chat for you. Latino USA. Okay. Rhonda, thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I really highly value them. Hopefully we're going to have time for questions, probably for you too at the end. But I'm gonna move over to Gloria here so we give her a chance to talk. Gloria, take it.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me on tonight's discussion. So I'm going to just give you some insight into me as a person and what I do and show you a little bit about myself. So first of all, it's important to know that if you have not been already noticed, I'm a Black woman. I grew up in Orange County, California. I am first generation American. I grew up, I'm a daughter of immigrants. They came as political refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So literally my family escaped the jungles of Africa and landed in Orange County. So if you have to get like the two polar opposites of the world spectrum, it's pretty much the influences that came from me. Growing up, I had private Lutheran education for 15 years of my life. So I had great education coming up. And what I always tell people is like, if you closed your eyes and you really wanted to think about it, I probably would sound like you're a total typical Orange County girl. I just have brown skin. And I do everything that what you would think an Orange County girl does. You know, I surf, I do yoga, I don't eat fried chicken and watermelon because I'm vegan. Like there's a whole system there that I just was not part of that culture per se of it. And which meant like I did not grow up on Negro spirituals. I grew up on Lutheran hymns where you do not move. And that was just how I grew up. And even yet with all that privilege, I mean, I'm talking about private school education, perfect SAT scores, a vernacular and a vocabulary that can get me through almost any single door. The moment I step into a room, my Blackness steps before me, and people's assumptions of me come with it. And so for me, I work in tech. I have a great salary. In fact, me, Oprah, and Beyonce are all considered the top 1% of African-American salaries with women, which just shows you the disparities that Black women are when they get paid. Yeah, when I come to things or places, it's very difficult sometimes because, again, I am the only in the room, and I've been the only for my whole life. And it means too that I'm never not the only. So all of this whole thing where it's like, man, I wish I could find a place where I'm just myself or just comfortable, or it can just be my full self. It usually is not, it's not at work, it's not at tech. I usually live in neighborhoods where I'm the only Black person in the neighborhood, you know, and it can be somewhat difficult. Beyond that, I'm married with 2 kids. So my husband is Caucasian. I have 2 mixed children. Like, we've always lived in really big cities. Reading is actually the smallest city I've ever lived in. And originally, when I started to come to Reading, like my normal Orange County girl, felt like, oh my God, how am I gonna even survive the weekend? There's no Nordstroms and no Whole Foods, which was like the biggest like worry I thought I had being in here. But unfortunately, the second I came up to Reading, I've had racial experiences that were very negative, to the point where we went out to eat with my in-laws at the time. And before I had even walked into the restaurant, I was kind of uneasy. And I asked my sister-in-law, who's a blonde, blue-eyed girl, I said, am I even safe to be here in this city, or should we be chilling at your house? And she thought it was so audacious that I even asked the question if I was safe in there. She was extremely offended. But we took a step into the restaurant, and I'm telling you, the music stopped, and we could barely get seated down. And when my waitress finally did come, she was staring at me so long that she poured coffee all over the table and all over me, and she just couldn't stop staring at me. And that experience has happened multiple times since I started to live here. And it's difficult sometimes to think of it because, you know, in the growing up where you think like the United States has a fabric of our society, I have all these rights, my rights are just the same as your rights, and we have structures in place in order to make sure that all people are equal and that all people are protected equally. And, you know, like people say, if you don't commit a crime, then, you know, you won't have the police at your front door. All of that is BS, because I've had police at my front door for crimes that not only did I not commit, but the suspect wasn't even the same gender as me, and yet they were still coming to raid our house. So there are things where systematically there is inequality. And I get that here like all the time. The leaders themselves have to make sure that they're making sure that the policies that they're enforcing are supportive of all different types of people. So the worries I have, like, I too was worried that I would wake up with a burning cross after seeing Black Lives Matter. And so our household had to figure out a way, like, how are we gonna not be like super living in fear? So we just made this massive sage, and I was like, well, if there's like, you know, burning cross in my front yard, I'm just gonna sage the hell out of the house and use it to light it. But it's a constant fear to actually live here. So Black Lives Matter, we had like sniper guns and they're pointed at me, and I knew I had to like talk to my mom and say goodbye and deal with all of that, but still speak out. And even beyond that, it was like, now after I've taken the stance and I know that there's militias around and that there's people in our government that have a really difficult time even saying my life matters, like, what do I do? Because the militias, when they're here, I'm still a Black person. So even our allies get like privilege in order to be able to walk around the community freely. But if there are people here that want to do harm to me just solely because they see my skin, how do I live my life in our community then too? Like, how do I choose where to walk and who goes to the grocery store? Things that are just normal everyday scenarios. And finally I had told my mom, I said, Mom, you know, what if I don't have like anxiety? What if I just have PTSD from being a Black woman in this, you know, white world and never being able to be my authentic self? So our household has things in place where, like, when I go for my morning walk, I walk 5 miles every single day. I map my run, not to like share it with everybody, but so my husband knows where my body is. Like, we have rules where we drive 2 different cars so that if I get pulled over, my children don't have to see the interaction that I have to have with the police, that they can go ahead and be with my white husband. We've had instances where my white husband has walked in after me and someone has told him directly, like, oh, I wish it was like it was back in the day when we could just shoot them and bury them in our front yard. Speaking about me being a minority and my children being a minority, and not knowing that my husband is Caucasian. And this has happened within like Reading. And to me, it was difficult because, you know, I don't know if it was because I was in a small city or if I was much more protected when I was in Orange County or LA or San Francisco or Houston or Amsterdam and all the other different places that I've lived in. But it was extremely, you know, you learn that you have fight or flight all the time. And I'm someone who's like a fighter. I will fight to the end in order to claim my space and say, I'm American, I deserve these rights. People fought for these rights and I get to own this space too. But my husband, who has lived with white privilege his whole life, realizes that his children and his wife don't have it. And he sometimes is very scared and doesn't know how to fight it either. And the problem with colonialism or the systems of white supremacy is that there are not places where I can go where that system has not been supreme, because even through colonialization, even Africa, where you would think would be the place that Black people can go and be on top, they're actually not at top because of colonialism. They still have these structures. So there's never a day where I can sit there and be like, I'm gonna chill, I'm gonna, you know, watch some Netflix and chill. And for me, who wants a nice rom-com, if I'm going to try to get into that mindset of just chilling out, I have to fight even to see a movie where a Black woman is portrayed as a love interest where she's not a slave or a prostitute, you know? So it's such a limited view of Black people and what they can do and like their place in this world. And so I sit there and think of like, okay, well, what can this team do, you know? And there's multiple different things that you can do. I was telling Shauna, like before this morning when I was thinking about what would I talk about, they talked about how when people hold on to secrets and don't have the space to be authentic, how bad it is for you. And it was something that was in like the Journal of Psychiatry, like back in the 70s. They showed like just basically holding on to secrets had increased anxiety, increased blood sugars, increased rates of having heart attacks, just overall not a good thing. And so I feel like people, when they don't get to be their authentic selves, are holding on to secrets or holding on to spaces that they don't need to hold on to in a very toxic way. And it's important that as therapists, you see that their experiences are valid experiences, even if it's not a perspective that you are used to. Like, you know, there's a very big thing that's called spiritual bypass, which I see a lot here in Reading, where it's just kind of like, oh, you know, love and light, you know, well, we believe all things are important, God sees all colors, and, you know, maybe if you chose peace and weren't so angry or whatnot. And it's kind of like, no, you know, people deserve to have the space in order to have all the emotions that they have. And just even able to vibe out of it or ignore it is something that someone has the privilege of doing, but someone else doesn't have the privilege of actually doing. So if you're in the oppressed group, you might not have that privilege of ignoring the fact that someone's constantly being racist to you, you know, or expecting you to explain, you know, what racism is, or doing all of this different work. And when you start to really think of like, of it from a human perspective, it's like asking the person who's going through the most trauma, you know, to not only verbalize their trauma and express their trauma, but be the one who provides the solution to the trauma. And so when we see things like, for me, it's police brutality or any type of systems of inequality, it triggers in a way that's extremely difficult. So for me, it's, I won't be able to sleep. Like, it will be 2 weeks before I'll be able to sleep. I already know that. I'll be so angry that my jaw won't open. So I'll just be super tense and my jaw won't open, which means I can't eat. I won't be able to eat for 2 weeks. So I'm in just this like manic state. And the unfortunate part of it is that it never stops, you know? So it's not like all of a sudden there's an episode and then it's not an experience again. It's the trauma never stops. And the way others handle the trauma are in ways where it's also extremely traumatic. So even when there are lynchings or videotapes of brutality or people that have like mishandled, you know, multiple different things, it's just triggers. They're constant triggers for me. And then I have to figure out also, how do I navigate just like life in this place where I'm not like an other and I don't have to teach someone how to deal with me as a person. So it's like, how do I go to a place where someone can even do my hair? You know, like, where here can you do my hair? I drive 3 hours to Sacramento to get my hair done, which is kind of like audacious when you start to really think about it. How can I make sure that my son is not labeled as an angry Black boy or big Black boy or a disruptive Black boy just because he's asking you questions about why he has to say the Pledge of Allegiance or other things of that nature? So it's somewhat difficult to constantly have to fight for your voice to be heard when the things that silences your voice is out of your control, and it's mostly people's perception of your skin. So yeah, I think that that's usually my perspective of it, you know. And when it came to the anti-racist literature and why I wanted it to be in all of the libraries in Reading, it was mostly so that we can have do a lot of work. I need everybody to do work so that we can advance the community forward, but it's also so that we can have some really deep conversations. And I'm learning now that there are like certain type of conversations that I can have. If you don't see that racism is a problem, or even like have a problem saying Black Lives Matter, I can't have conversations with you. I can't bring you from 0 to 1, because I'm gonna need you to go from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, you know? And so in order to try to explain to you why my life matters or why you should be concerned about these issues, like, that's work that someone's gonna have to do within themselves. But once you've done the work and it's clarifying terms or anything like that, then we can have a real discussion about it. And I think for me, it personally comes down to a human rights issue and like a civil rights issue. These are the rights that are given under our Constitution to all people, but there's a group of people that aren't getting those rights even addressed to them, or being able to even use those rights. And then it's a human rights. These people should be able to live anywhere without fear of another person. And if that something was to happen, they should be able to at least believe that justice will be served. And right now there's a huge community that's not getting justice in any way of the word, whether it's health justice, educational justice, justice within police teams. There's just biases that they're constantly fighting out of. And those biases never stop. There's never an ease. There's never like a time where you aren't being judged, or where I am not being judged based on my skin. And it's even to the point where I had to talk to like my spouse and my family, you know, my spouse's family, that they had to do anti-racism work, because even though you have a Black wife and we have Black children, there are still statements that are said that are still oppressive. And if you're not doing the work just from that perspective of interacting with other Black people in your community, then you're going to have a really hard time. So it's just never ending. It's exhausting.
It sounds exhausting. Gloria, would you share really quickly with us, you shared a couple of resources at the Juneteenth celebration in terms of how people can check their own biases and be more self-aware. And then also the structure, what's that one, like the levels of being an ally?
Scaffold.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes. So there's multiple, like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? There's multiple avenues that you can take. One of the things is to understand privilege. Where is the privilege? And there's always like a privileged group and an oppressed group. Privileged, there's ways to check it. It's not just racial. It can be gender. It can be social, economic. And I will drop those links into here. BuzzFeed has a really good one to talk about your privilege. Once you understand privilege, you can be an ally or an accomplice and decide that you're going to also support the people in the fight. And so I will drop that link in a second as well. And then from there, it's the scaffold. And the scaffold is from your point and your perspective right now, what can you do to change? And I always tell people it's not enough to not be racist, you have to be actively anti-racist, because the whole system itself is racist. So you have to be actively dismantling the actual system. And so I will drop those in right now. Let me pull them all up while you start to look.
Cool. Okay, you're dropping those.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to say one thing about that I kind of had a revelation myself, and I was talking with a few therapist friends about this, where therapists aren't talking about racism in the same way, in my experience anyway, in the same way that we're talking about domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault. We have always known how to hold that tension between, staying quiet, hearing from clients what we need to hear, not imposing our own views on other people. We've always held that tension with speaking out against violence, aggression, assault, and really advocating for those clients. And I've noticed this hesitancy to speak out against racism and advocate for clients in the same way that therapists, I think, have always innately and have been trained to speak out and to advocate for clients who are experiencing violence in other ways. And I just feel like doing the work on really looking at bias and learning more about racism is maybe one of the ways that therapists can learn how to be advocates in a different way. Okay, you still dropping links? Yeah. While you do that, Eddie, you ready for us? I see him. Eddie, one of the things I was hoping, we had a really rich conversation at the Beloved Community Board meeting. I was like, whoa, people just want to talk about it like they're so ready. And one of the things Eddie was talking about was the importance of building trust. And I was wondering if that's where you would want to start. I think you're muted still, Eddie. Or wait, let me help. Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm Eddie McAllister. I've been here in Reading since '90. My background is community organizing with public health. I did have a county email address, just like probably some of you. And as I'm speaking, I want you to think about a couple of things. Like Shauna just mentioned, trust. So you can interweave trust into a lot of stuff, and also being blessed. And I feel that I've been blessed with a pretty good lifestyle here in Reading. My two boys were not born here, but were raised here from a young age, and they had some experiences. But trust. I'd like to ask, out of all the MFTs, how many of you have Black clients? Just about almost everyone. And how many do you have? 1, 4, 1. Yeah, she has 4. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Like when you go to a local meeting, and well, I have to say, when I go to a local meeting, when I was a community organizer, I would I think like Rhonda mentioned, be the only person in the room, or me and maybe another. And once again, I want you to think more about trust. I think there's a saying that a lot of sayings don't make sense or don't have to be true, but they're just traditional. Black folks don't go to therapists; they go to church. How many of you therapists have heard that? Yeah, and it's somewhat true, and then it's somewhat not true. But keeping it to Shasta County, where the population is well, it used to be less than 1%. I'm sure it's a little bit more. Trust is a big issue. And a lot of people don't realize it, that people automatically, when someone is serving you, doesn't look like you, then there's a decrease in trust. That the fact that they went or took the time or thought about going to see a therapist or some type of social service agency or education. I think somebody mentioned something about education, and don't even get started about law enforcement. And to talk about law enforcement, there's so many underreported incidents. There's probably something going on right now as we speak that has racial overtones or racist, but we never hear about it because it doesn't get reported to the police. They try to handle it themselves. They try to handle it in their family, that type of thing. I'm a member of Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect, and I'm a black man on a board. It's mostly white, but seem like the only one that gets these reports of problems. I'm working on 2 cases right now, and both of them are from the Shasta County Jail. But other incidents, our requirement is if you want to file a complaint, to the board members, and we'll talk about it and see how we can advocate for you. Well, it don't happen. You don't hear from them again. I don't know if they didn't think about it being important enough to write it down, the facts. We just ask for the facts. We don't ask for feelings. We just ask for the facts so we can go over it. But when you ask them to do something and not play the race card, but write the facts down, just write the facts down, especially in high school. Well, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened, but they won't write it down. They won't take the time to put it down on paper so we can know about it. So once again, being so underreported, racial justice. That thing about racial justice, that's kind of like our topic, you know. How many are agreeing with me that race is social constructed? Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Social constructed race. And then to me, racial
Please
justice.
say more about that.
Pardon?
Please say more about that term.
Social constructed race. Well,
Yes,
from
please.
from what I know about it is, you know, race started with and then they were different color. They didn't look like you, so they got labeled socially just African, and so socially they got constructed to be part of a or named. I kind of believe they got named into a particular ethnic group or underserved population, that type of thing.
Eddie, I'm going to stop you. We can't hear you very well. We're losing you.
Oh, you are? Oh, geez.
I'm wondering if you're well, I think your connection might be a little poor.
Let me see, what can I do?
I just wanted to hear you.
Is that better?
It sounds fine now.
Is it? Oh, sounds fine now?
You were breaking up.
My, okay. So, cultural humility, you know, I think that's the first time that I heard this word, cultural humility.
Losing you
We're
again.
losing you again.
Okay, let's see. What can we do here? How about now?
Every time you ask that, it sounds good.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Somebody said if
Okay.
it keeps going, you can call in audio, just your phone might help, but try again.
Is this better?
Yes.
Oh, it is better. Maybe it's these
Well,
earphones
it's
I have.
definitely your internet connection's been shaky.
Oh yeah. Spectrum. If anybody wants to know. So we're talking about like I said, you know, just kind of think about trust and the lack of trust, you know, in this county, just this county, you know. And so first word in our statement grassroots. So I was with the county for 18 years, and I like being grassroots now because I'm not restricted on some of the things that I do. But I do give props to the county that allowed me to start the Beloved Community, which was in 2013 when we start to celebrate the 50th anniversary. And I used the word Shasta County Beloved Community because the Beloved Community was one of Dr. King's speeches. I mean, not speeches, dreams. So we adopted the Beloved Community because of the things that stood for civil rights, social justice. But I put Shasta County on the front of it, not to be stealing Dr. King's dreams or his family's dreams and maybe not going to jail or getting sued. So when we speak about Beloved Community, so, you know, the big deal is I'm excited that so many of us, like tonight, are working together and talking about race and equality, justice and equality. And certainly there's so much, this is one to Shauna last night. I think I got 5 or 6 Zoom calls that are almost on the same subject or same 2 or 3 subjects, justice, equality, and for folks to be coming together now behind the death of George Floyd to well, like they say, get people woke. I love the song by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Wake Up Everybody. I think President Obama used that song. Wake up everybody. You know, I was working with United Way, and we before the car fire, we started this trust initiative, lack of trust, increasing trust in Shasta County, and then the fire happened, and we had to, well, United Way had to go into disaster mode.
Hey, Eddie, we're still losing you, and I really want to hear what you are saying. Will you try one thing for me? Will you try to shut off your video and see if it helps your audio any? Because I really want to hear you, and it's breaking up a ton.
It is bad, huh? Okay, let me shut off my audio.
No, shut off your video and let me and talk now, and let's see if we can hear you better.
All right.
I'm
How
sorry,
about now?
I don't see you and hear you, but okay, I can hear you.
Is it doing it better?
That you sound a little better, actually.
Okay, good. So What was I talking about? Oh, trust. Yeah.
Trust.
Think about trust. Think everything I talk about, trust, a lack of trust, and increasing trust, you know. NFTs. The
Eddie,
speaker
we're
is not
still
working.
losing you.
I think, Eddie, if you want to just take the phone and call in via phone, that will probably be your best option,
Yeah.
because I think it's something with the speaker and the internet. The speaker and within your computer system. I could go into detail into exactly what the problem is, but the reality is you should probably call in and use your audio.
Glorious tech.
Yeah. Okay, let me
Do you
find
know
the
how to
link.
do that, Eddie?
Just call in.
Yeah, if you look to the email that Shauna sent us, there should be a call-in number too. And then just call in via voice and join the conversation that way.
Okay, let me see. What I have to find the email. Okay.
Here, let me see if I can post it in the comments here. 1 second. Hang with us, guys. Thank you for your patience. It is.
And I think while you two are doing that, I wanted to just go back and touch on the whole race as a social construct, because I think it's really important to note that I think that the differentiation upon race, like depending on like where you go, it's been used. I mean, people are people in general, but race has been used as a dividing thing for quite some time. In our society, when you look at slavery happened across a lot of different types of people, but even within that system, there was this whole thing about having like an uppity Negro, where it was someone who was not in their place. So the best way to do that was to divide people and say, well, if you were white, you were still, even a slave, an indentured servant, was still considered white, and they had privilege, white privilege through that. Yeah, if you were Black, you did not have really any privilege. You were 3/4 a person. You still couldn't. They had all these systematic hurdles in place based solely on race. The race as a division, it's not solely, dividing Black and white. It also is used to divide, Latinos, Afro-Latinos versus, African Americans. It's used to divide Indigenous people against other groups of people. And if we really looked at it like from a holistic view, you would see that like when you started from hunter-gatherers, everybody was just tribes. They're all parts of different tribes going around. And so it happens to be that my tribe that has more melanin, even though, I'm 100% Congolese, but if it was a mixture of anything else, because I have melanin, I'm now less than. Yet if you're, a mixture of Celtic and Viking and all of this stuff, that tribe is the perspective that's continuously pointed out. And yet we still don't even talk about, race per se as that perspective. So when we learn history solely from a white perspective. We learn Columbus came to the United States and discovered the United States, and the founding fathers were fantastic, and then there were the pilgrims that did no wrong, and it's always this perspective of only coming from that narrative. But the actualities of how these choices affected other people, it's never people versus people. It's one race is superior to the other, and then having that narrative be the only narrative you heard. So, when we hear about early civilizations, it's like you hear about Vikings and Celtics, maybe even Egyptian cultures, but there are all these other civilizations that people really don't even get to have part of the story, even talking about how great they were, because the narrative is always from a perspective that where white is supreme. Eddie is back.
Yeah.
There he is.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Now you hear my dog.
We can also hear your dogs, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I know I got an echo, but you can hear me, huh?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, good. Yeah. So you see behind me, I have this as the background, but the 401 years of inequality. I thought about it just Saturday. What day was it? Sunday. Saturday. You know, the United States celebrated 44 years, I think it was, of signing of the Declaration of Independence. And, you know, technically it's 244, the USA is 244 years old. But slavery is 401 years old. And so systematic slavery is still going on. And what I'm concerned about is these young folk. I think about the kids that were marching down at the courthouse, City Hall. I'm concerned that they were all involved with that march, and they're out there yelling Black Lives Matters, but I don't think they really know. And the organizer, I know her, and she admitted to me that a majority of those kids had no idea what they were demonstrating, protesting against. And that's where I'm concerned, is to try to educate them. For those of you who went to Juneteenth, you know, to educate people more on Juneteenth, what that meant, the slavery portion of it. And few people, I mean, I saw a young Black man at the bank. He said he had never heard of Juneteenth. And it happens. A lot of people just don't know what it is, you know. And I told him it's actually the only African American holiday. But getting back to trust and being inclusive, you know, I think I look on this panel here, and I don't see, am I correct? Do I see any Latino? Do I?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
everybody so far, Eddie.
Huh?
Yeah, we've got
Everybody?
Yuvia on the call. Who else do we have on the call?
I would let them identify themselves because I
Yeah.
can't assume someone's identity for them, but I have seen people bringing them up.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, Native American. I have a lot of friends in the Mian community. A lot of friends. I have 2 goddaughters that are Mian, and I don't see them at the table. So that's one of my goals, is to get the Latinos and the Mian or Southeast Asian population to the planning table so we can move on and talk about racial justice, trust. You know, like I say, underreported. I just saw on TV, is a special is coming on. I'm not exactly sure, but racial names that have been called people from China or from Asia. The names they've been called. It was just a guy got fired. He was president of a tech company, and these people were there. Did anybody see that? Yeah, yeah. They're just having a birthday, and he goes off on him. He got fired. So once again, underreported. Does anybody know of any cases of Asian men or women being harassed? There you go. Did you report it? No. So
Well,
that.
I think, Eddie, what you're even bringing up too, if you don't mind me cutting in, is just being able to speak up when you do see something that is unjust.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of times we assume that it's going to be the responsibility of the oppressed group to do all the work. And again, it's important to speak up when we see it, whether it's at home, in our community, in leadership. It happens quite a bit. It's not just one race that is oppressed or one gender. There's a lot of different ways oppression shows up. We're just talking about race right now, but there are many ways that oppression can be identified.
A lot of ways.
I think, if I may,
Yeah.
Eddie, this is Yuvia. And one of the
hi.
things that I think, hi, Eddie, it's been a while. So I just wanted to comment on just the inequalities of accessing services for some of the minority populations here in Shasta County. That despite, you know, there's a lot of wonderful agencies, but at the same time, there are underserving a huge part of our population, especially like, let's say, the Hispanic and Latino population, due to not hiring enough people that are bilingual, turning people away because they are bilingual. So when you are talking about trust, is that a lot of reasons why, let's say, my community, which is the Hispanic and Latino community, do not go and access services, whether it's from public health, women's refuge, even with this whole COVID. It's not just fear of being deported or being discriminated, but also not having accessible services in their own language. So, like, you know, I've been working a lot with like crisis, domestic violence, sexual assault, and I'll tell you how many times women, men, and families have been turned away because they're like, well, we don't have someone that speaks your language. Come back or bring your own interpreter. Or they're using the children to interpret, and then just educating, you know, sometimes the staff, and saying, no, do not use the children as your interpreter. This is not their job. Not only are you re-traumatizing, you know, this child, but you're also parentifying them and putting them in a place that they shouldn't be. And they are there as your guest. So please treat them as such. So I think, you know, when we're all speaking about also advocating, is remembering that even in our community and with some of the agencies, although they mean well, oftentimes they still need a lot of education as to how the inequalities of their services are being shown and not really serving a huge part of our population. And the reason why their numbers are like, oh, where are the Latinos? Where are the, you know, the Hispanics? It's like, they're here, but you're not going to get them, you know, to come to your agency because, one, there's no trust. And, but as soon as they find out that, hey, you serve them in a respectful, in their own language, I mean, the word of mouth just spreads like fire, and then they do start accessing services. So like with COVID right now, the lack of education that sometimes, you know, this population is struggling with, it's, you know, we are right now the ones that are hardest hit when it comes to this, you know, with COVID. And that also comes with a huge background of how our health system is so messed up that we are the ones that, again, the inequalities are showing up, and we are dying at much higher rates. And it's really unfortunate that a lot of people don't see just the systemic issues of how we're just affected. And then also, just on a last note, how, you know, we still have all of these children in camps that are also, you know, dying, are being traumatized by being separated from their families because they're trying to, you know, come into this country illegally. And from what we know about attachment and trauma, and the fact that a lot of people are okay with that, it's just mind-boggling to me that, you know, we talk about the Holocaust, but this is very much the same. So anyways, or similar, not the same, but very similar.
Thank you for sharing, Yuvia. I'm gonna cut you off because I'm so mindful of time. But I did want to make sure if anybody has a question that they have not asked. I saw a comment that I wanted. Bridgeford said, so much denial in this area, RE racism. Learning more from listening to Black Minds Matter. Yeah, so Black Minds Matter that is a training where you can also get a free CEU. That's on that anti-racism link that I posted with Luke Wood. He's a PhD, and CAMFT provided that. There's also there's a comment, but it kind of sounds like a question from Katie Bell Simpson. It says, my daughter's mental health worker argued with her over Black Lives Matter. And I could turn that into a question if you wanted me to, which is, what is a client to do if a mental health worker is arguing with them? What would you say?
Well, I mean, like, I'm not a mental health professional, but in general, it comes to safe space. Like, if the person has to advocate that much for something that they feel is so important to them, like, are you really creating a safe space for them to share their whole self? Or are you only creating a safe space for you to see them the way that you want to see them, And are you either furthering someone else's trauma and perpetuating trauma, or are you leaving space for healing? And what I have told people on both sides, whether they're the therapist or the person seeking therapy, is that you cannot heal racial trauma unless you do the work inside yourself to realize where you are perpetuating racial trauma, and vice versa. So it's difficult. I don't know the structure where the person's going to, if they can even get a new counselor, but I think that the therapy would then be not as effective. Like, if I'm putting myself in the person's shoes and there was a therapist who was like fighting me over that basic agreement per se, then I think I would have a harder time listening to the therapist for different types of tools that they could give me to deal with things, because they're not even seeing my perspective. And I experienced this with my children, when my kids don't say the pledge, they just don't say it. Like, I talk to them respectfully. You can, not say it. They know it. They've just never been in situations where they had to say a pledge every single day, and it's very strange to them. And they, take a knee during pledge times, but it was extremely offensive to my son's teacher that he would take a knee during pledge because her child was in the military. And I said, I can understand that you two won't ever see eye to eye, but if you hear out to why it bothers Bentley, or I even ask him, maybe he will be understanding and show, the respect from his perspective that he has to do. But if you can't even see eye to eye, then all further communication is going to be extremely strained and difficult.
I don't think.
Robert, thank you, at the vet from color. We learned how to not say the pledge, or to respectfully deny the pledge, from another vet of color. So I appreciate you saying that it is offensive to you, but who taught my son how to respectfully deny it and still stand for his rights was another vet who sat him down and had an extensive talk to him about it.
Coming from the therapist perspective, all of us have clients who come in and they have some type of belief system that is not our own. So, whatever skill set that you use, I mean, I had a little 6-year-old the other day, and I have a book called The World Needs More Purple People. And we're going to read the book. And I was so excited, hey, have you seen Frozen? And he said, what? And I said, have you seen Frozen? He said, Frozen, that's gay.
Whoa.
Wow. Okay. So, what do you? At that point, the parental unit is sitting right next to the kid. There was no objection. There was no correction. And I said, oh, okay. Then you probably won't be interested in the other 4 books that I have, which have all Black characters. So, yeah, let's do something else. And I can't say to this kid, I'm not going to start talking to him about what gay means and no, that's not my job, my role. My role is to get him to sit for more than 4 minutes at a time and focus on one thing. So if I bring into it what my own personal feelings are about being gay or not gay, or whatever else is going on in his family. That's not my role. And that takes me out of the role of being therapist. That takes me into the realm of Rhonda being offended. And those are two completely different things. So I think that we need to be very, very aware of, you know, who we are in the moment. That's part of why we had to do 3,000 hours of training, you know, before we could go sit for the test.
Yeah. Ali says, very well stated. We've got another comment here. Peter Young says, I just finished White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. It's helping me understand the massive ways that white people perpetrate racial trauma. I highly recommend it for anyone interested in learning more about this. There's also another resource on here that is that Luke Wood, who I talked about, who did Black Minds Matter. It looks like he's going to have a 5-part Zoom talk, and that resource is in the comments as well. Katie says, well said, Rhonda. Okay, I'm very mindful of time. The thing that I am realizing as a clinician is, like, every time I've asked, like, hey, do you want to talk about this? People really want to talk about it, and they have a lot to say. It happened at the Beloved board meeting. I was like, oh my gosh, this could be a whole talk. Like, I just said, like, hey, by the way, we're doing this, you know, panel, and everyone had something to say. And what I'm realizing tonight is, like, what a lot of people probably need to do is share their experiences and share how this is impacting them. I have one story really quickly. I have a Black client who the last few weeks I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about it. Like, he's definitely going to bring it up. And like, you know, when George Floyd stuff was just blowing up, it was like, oh my gosh, he's definitely going to talk about this. And then he didn't talk about it. And I kind of let him not talk about it. And then the next week, you know, we had protests here, and I was like, we're definitely going to talk about this. And then he didn't talk about it. So finally I just had to get real kind of awkward, and I felt silly. And I was like, so I've noticed you haven't talked about it, but, like, are you okay? Well, how are you? And then because I brought it up, he just, you know, all these things. Oh, this happened, and then, like, this happened to me, and I went to this place, and I was at this, and I realized that he wasn't sure if I was safe or not. He didn't know that he could talk about it with me until I was the one who asked. So I wanted to say that. It is 7:07, so we're going to officially end. If people want to stay on the call and chat, I am happy to sit here and keep this chat open for you, but I want to be respectful of our speakers as well and of their time. So I do want to thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences. I'm really aware of how much emotional labor we're asking people of color to take on right now, and so we so appreciate you for speaking with us. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to pass them on to you guys. Any last comments?
I'll stay on to answer questions if people have questions.
I'll stay.
Let's do it. So if you're going to go, make sure you click that course evaluation if you need your CEU. And then we can officially end, but I'm happy to keep it open for as long as people have questions or messages.
I wanted to be able to talk about how a couple of things, so I'll stay as well.
Please. Yes. Actually, Josie, I would love for you to share all that you have to share. So go ahead, and then I'm going to read through and see if I can pick out questions. So Josie, you talk.
All right. I heard the question of, oh, go ahead, Gloria.
Sorry, just before you talk, if you have a question, can you put it in the chat too, so that at least we can see some of these questions that are coming up, so that I'm like neurotic about it. So if I can at least see them popping up, then I'll know that we have to think about that.
Okay, so I wanted to say a couple of things. One thing that we didn't get a chance to cover tonight was internalized racism. I think that it's an important topic because sometimes as Black people, we don't even we're not even sure about other Black people. And that's because of the messages that we've been given growing up. That's because of the lack of representation in TV and movies and everywhere you look, and dolls. And that's because of that lack of representation. And I had been here since I was 16, but I remember that I got to a point where it had been so long since I had seen another Black person, and I had heard like conservative talk about Black people that was negative. And I was just kind of sketchy myself, like, you know, and it makes me think that I have internalized racism, and what does that look like for me? And if I can admit that I have some of that going on, and I have to check that sometimes, like if I'm like gonna clutch my bag a little bit closer to my body as I'm walking past a group of Black people or something like that, just minute. But if I can admit that I have that, then, you know, sometimes I wonder why it's so hard for some white people to admit that they have racism. I'm just like, I'm me. I look at me every day. And I still struggle with some of those things because of the narrative in the news and what I heard my latter years of high school, just being here in this environment. And so I did want to briefly touch on that. If you guys have any thoughts about internalized racism, I so would love to hear them. And another thing is that I noticed that there's other dog whistles in this community. One of the ones that has come up repeatedly in my experiences with other folks is, I don't know why, but rap music seems to be a dog whistle for me now. Because when I hear people say, "Oh no, I don't listen to rap music," and then they like kind of expect me to agree that I don't listen to rap music. I absolutely listen to rap music. I like rap music, and when I hear people have like a certain tone about rap music, it actually I'm like, whoop, that's a dog whistle for me personally, and I don't really want to, you know, be 100% open with that person. I'm kind of sketchy about that person. Yeah, so that will create a distance for me if I because I think rap music is an art just like anything else, and if you can't see the beauty in rap music, then I just don't know what to say. And so I wanted to talk about that. And the other thing is, I think most folks know that I'm a peer support specialist. I work for Shasta County Mental Health, and there was a question that came up about what people should do in a situation where they're linked up with a therapist who is not listening about their experience to them. You know, that's what peer support actually is there for, so that we can get you, let us know what it is what piece of your mental health recovery that you're missing. And part of our job is to advocate for you so that you can, so that, you know, we can make that link between you and the therapist, or you're 100% okay with finding a different therapist. And I encourage that. If you feel like you're not with someone who you're vibing with, they're coming off a little awkward, maybe you think that, oh, I don't know how many times you've been around a person like me, but you're acting mighty sketchy. So, and that happens, unfortunately. So I just wanted to touch on those. I think that's all I wanted to touch on. Oh, and the other thing personally for me, during COVID, say by some unfortunate chance, I ended up with COVID-19. So I'm going to knock on all the wood. And I had to be hospitalized. I recognize, so I've already talked to my boyfriend about it. I absolutely need him to be there. I'm going to ask the nurses, are you conservative or are you liberal? I'm going to say Black Lives Matter, and I want to know what it looks like are they going to respond, hell yes, Black Lives Matter? Are they going to be sketchy about it and say all lives matter? Like, I need to know who's going to be caring for me. And I think that's a part of my racial trauma, is I need to know who's going to be taking care of me. Am I going to be okay when my babies walk into this hospital room? Are you going to treat them funny? Because it's important to me that they're treated kindly. I don't, you know, a lot of the times when I've been hospitalized and my babies have, like, say, you know, cesarean or just something, and my babies have come up to the hospital room. Their dad had been taking care of them. So their hair is all over their head. And I'm just like, ah. And I get concerned that people are going to treat my babies poorly because their hair is all over their head. And I think that's actually one reason why Black people, it's so important to Black people that we take care of the appearance of our children, because we are concerned about how people might treat them if they think they're just little raggedy, broke Black children, quite frankly. And so, all that to say that I have a plan for when I go, if I should go into the hospital, because I want to make sure, especially like Mercy or Shasta Regional, that I'm treated with the most respect that I can have control over. I guess I don't know. You can't really control all your circumstances, but in a life or death situation, which COVID could very well be, I would want to know that the people taking care of me care about my life. So,
all right, Josie, I love you. I'm going to counter you for one. Oh, Wanda, you want to go next?
Well, I want to dovetail, thank you. I want to dovetail on the hospital thing. So having worked there on the nursing staff, I can tell you of multiple situations where patients have had something to say, whether it's, well, I just didn't like the way she came in my room. I'm walking. I don't really want her to take care of me. There was a gentleman, 19-year-old kid, who complained to the head charge nurse that I came into his room, and his exact words were, you know how they do. She was doing all of this. Not understanding and knowing that the house supervising nurse that night was my little ginger bunny from Connecticut and New York, and she was just not having it. So her question to him was, Rhonda came in your room and snapped her finger. Well, you know how they are. Actually, I don't. Well, I just don't want her taking care of me. And she said, I completely, understand you have an issue. Just so you know, anyone on this staff tonight has been trained by Rhonda, but I'll give you whomever you want. And it just was like, thank you. It was a thing. There, in medicine, I have run more into issues of things not being fully explained rather than not being taken care of. And what I've seen from that staff, I have to say, it was one of the best nursing jobs I've ever had. And I felt comfortable with pretty much everyone I worked with. And that is also to say the other side of that coin is we're Californians. And so people who come from out of the area, from other countries, will say, one thing about Californians is you never know how they really land. In other areas, people know who they are. But in the grand scheme of things, I would feel safe if I were a lay person in any of the healthcare facilities here, in that actually some folks are afraid not to do the best job for people of color, as to be perceived as someone who hates on us. So just to put you a little at ease, but again, 30 years ago, I'm aging myself again, it was different, and I chose a completely different alternative because I had no idea what it would be like. From what I knew, they took your babies from you and they drug tested them. And I'm just not having that. You're not taking my child. And that brought up all kinds of, I can't even imagine someone taking my child into another room without discussing with me. And for a lot of people, that's normal. But our kids get taken away for things that are perceived and or not perceived. But the healthcare that I've seen here, the biggest issue you may run into, from my experience, is things not being explained in a way that you would understand. And being a nurse, I've had to say, I'm a nurse and I don't get it. What are we talking about? And then it's just a matter of, I don't understand. And so I'm defending those people, although I changed careers, so that tells you a lot. Go ahead, Ms. Gloria. Thanks for yielding.
Yeah, so I was just gonna make comments on showing up with raggedy kids, because God knows my kids are raggedy sometimes. And it's mostly because my kids are fully human. We live so close to rivers, and they're gonna go in the river and they can swim, and they're gonna look out of place. and maybe their hair is going to be unkept at the moment. But what it is really systematic racism on beauty standards, or standards of what a parent should look like. Because there are times when there's other people who look like completely raggedy, but nobody bats an eye on, you know, kids in their pajamas going through Walmart. But to have the expectation that my kid needs to be in a polo shirt and khakis and all combed in order for us to go out the door is just like unnecessary weight like added to it. You know, I need to be able to run errands and live my life with my kids in a fully whole way. And what I noticed sometimes for me was like, not everybody's doctor visits end up with a social worker. You know, like I would always sit there and be like, oh, what do you mean it's common practice? I was a checkup. Why do I have a social worker here? And it's just these assumptions that something has to be off kilter. They got to figure out something because, you know, I'm bringing my kid to the emergency room because, you know, he had an emergency. It's a normal, typical emergency. So I definitely ask people to really, you know, the same expectations you have for your kids or your nieces and nephews or your grandkids, you know, I have for my kids. Ask you to have them for my kids too. And it's, you know, whether it's that they be represented in the books that they have, or that their family be seen as a family that's normal in society, that we need to really be pushing that way, because there is a lot of excellent Black mothers, Black fathers, Black grandparents, Black caregivers. But if you are assuming that there's something wrong just because, you know, they're in your space and they're Black, it's really a difficult thing to start to unpack. And even when we start, like, I'm all pro therapy. My mom is, she works at her dream was to work in the PTSD department at the local VA. So she actually came out of retirement in order to go through nursing school and make that happen. She's been doing that for 20 years. And we are all pro mental health in our house. So we advocate for going to see a therapist, and it should be like a norm for people to be able to do. But to sit there and think like there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with the person, or there's something wrong with the family, and like having that component of it is very difficult. So if we're going to see people as problematic based on their skin color, and not see like, hey, I'm going to provide tools to these people who just need some tools, then we're not going to be able to have deeper conversations surrounding just mental health in general, you know, if you're coming in with some devices.
Yeah, Gloria, there's a question here from Chloe Lucas, and it's a lot of what you're kind of saying. And I've actually just had this conversation with a therapist too about, so she says, as a Black woman, I've always been raised that there's a higher performance behavior expectation for Black kids than others. Now, as a child therapist, I see so many children of color who are perceived as overly aggressive or overly emotional when in comparative situations, behaviors are dismissed. How can I approach this situation with a child in therapy, knowing the social climate, but also as a therapist, how can I help a child who's trying but is expected to be better? And I'll just say, I just had this conversation with another therapist where we see a trend of Black children coming in, and they're the ones who are getting oppositional defiant disorder instead of PTSD or ADHD, right? Where we're seeing them as more aggressive. Anyway, so I hear that question.
Like, I sit there and think, like, wouldn't you be? Like, if I look at my 10-year-old, my 11-year-old, and see like how many times in images is he the hero? You know, from the time that he was born, did he get to be a hero in any of the media that I gave to him? You know, how many times has he been picked on already because of his hair? And it starts at about 1.5 years with my kids, is when all of the racial picking apart comes into it. And so how many times has he had to experience that without having the tools to verbalize it, to the way to de-escalate himself? Like, if you're at 11 years old and, you know, he went through 2 years of not having recess for different reasons, but mostly because he was standing up for himself. And it was like, after having all this time of being labeled as this bad kid for just asking questions, like you're either questioning and you're defiant, or you're questioning and, you know, the narrative is not from your perspective. But a lot of times it's like, why are you're presenting history that's counterintuitive to him himself. So by the time he is to that point where he's angry, like in my mind, I'm like, of course you're angry. Like, there's nothing was given to you to even say like, don't be angry, or to de-escalate that anger. But also, nothing was given in the other way to validate who you are as a person, saying that you are welcomed, you are whole, you're beautiful, you're intelligent. It's all of these counter narratives. So I think that one of the things that we need to discuss is like, how do we change some of the narratives around Black children even, you know? My Black son is as big as I am, and people keep saying like, oh, wow, he's a grown man. Like he wears grown man clothing. He's a size medium man. Oh, he's a grown man. No, he's not a man. He's a child. He's 11, you know? And the more we label, wow, she's a grown man, or he's a grown man, or she looks like a girl, or, you know, all of these different things, we're not letting children be children, you know, and that perspective. And one thing that I can think, you know, as a therapist, you all have the knowledge to have hindsight to know like some of these experiences that they're going through is something they will go through for their whole entire life. At no point does a Black boy not become a scary thing. At no point, you know, like no matter what he's wearing, no matter, you know, what he's at, it's always this big black man theory. It's just like To Kill a Mockingbird talks a lot about the big Black man. So if you know that, you have the opportunity to have a client in therapy, I would just say, give them the tools, you know, that you can to say, you know, how can I help you get some of that out? Because what I feel happens to Black children is that we're all putting all this stuff in, and it's just like a pressure cooker. And then it's an explosion, which is an explosion from that normal people would happen without tools to say, let's get it out. That in underfunded schools, they don't have art anymore to get it out. They don't have music to get it out. They usually don't have counseling to get it out. So you have a disproportionate among race in these underfunded schools that don't have tools to even express themselves in ways that are healing, that we recognize as healing to different communities, you know? So I think that if I was in your shoes where I was like, wow, I had this perspective of being able to have this person that's different and that who has been in a other, and this is my safe space, how can I advocate for them and give them tools that will benefit them for the rest of their life? You know, how can I plant some of those seeds that will continue to make them grow? And some of it is just like, you know, Gloria, you are extremely smart. You're a smart kid. You know, you're a smart kid. You know, I understand the way you're being taught history doesn't see you as heroes, but I know you're a hero. You know, you can be a hero. And these are the ways that heroes act. And just knowing that and saying like, you're a hero, you're acting like a hero. Let me give you some praise for that. Way to choose the right choice and not pinpoint every single point of failure. Because what happens in the Black community is when you fail as a person in any type of way, you fail for the whole Black community. It's, I knew you couldn't do it. Oh, I knew those people were like that. I knew that this, until you have a huge weight that you're constantly holding at all times, which is just not fair to anybody.
It's also, you know, being a person who works with a lot of children. I actually teach the hero's journey, and I teach mindfulness. And the Calm app, which is blowing up right now during the pandemic, LeBron James has 4 or 5 meditations on there. And what's really cool about them is that, right off the bat, you ask, do you know who this guy is? Yeah. Okay, well, let's listen to how he gets into this mindset or that mindset. And then I tie it into where you are in your journey. But the first thing that I have to do is validate and then listen and then join. And going back to what Mr. Eddie said about the trust factor, right off the bat, I need to pull back and ask, how you doing? Because that's one thing that we generally don't get asked is, how are you? And especially the way that we are taught in school, the way that we are taught about other cultures. Like I read a textbook recently and I was so offended because it was like the African-American family. Well, my people were Puerto Rican. But anyway, the African-American family is driven by the female. Well, because our men were taken. And you know what? I grew up with 2 parents. I saw both of my parents pretty much every day. So people had to convince me that Black fathers abandon their children because I had never seen that. And people had to convince me that there were programs that programs are the reason why I would get this out of the other. I'm still paying student loans just like everybody else. So there's this whole false narrative thing that gets infused very, very early. And it is reflected for my experience in the therapy realm. My kids usually come to me and they're sad. And there's this overwhelming sadness where I'm like, whoa, hey, no, it's not about the, I mean, of course I validate the sadness, but let's look at this way and let's look at that way. Not so much reframing, but what would it look like if this? And can you make that your reality? But we've got to know how to breathe. As a culture of Americanized Western people, we don't breathe. And the first thing that happens when we get upset, when that amygdala gets triggered, is we go, and everything tenses up and we hold our breath. So just simply saying, breathe, and waiting. And we're not a patient culture. And we don't tend to, in the masses, listen to each other and really actually listen. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, just hit on with Miss Josie, the reason I put the Spike Lee School Days in there is the black on black racism, the difference between those of us who are darker complected compared to, say, my kids who are much lighter. My kids have blonde hair. Two of them look just like me, the other one doesn't. And I was stopped a couple times by police. So whose kids are those? And I'm like literally pulling one off. Oh no, I found some random white kid, thought I'd breastfeed him. I mean, it's just right it's that ridiculous, but that is the existence. And there was the slaves that worked in I'm not going to use the words that we usually use for this, but there were folks who worked out in the field and there were the folks who worked in the house. And, I'm still shocked at the people who don't understand that the house Negroes were usually bastard children of the master and or the overseer. And so there are whole clubs, and I can ask the sisters on here, are you AKA or Delta? And they know what I'm talking about. I come from Deltas. There are sororities. If you're light and bright and almost white, you pledge this way, and if you're not, then you pledge that way. And there's conflict, or in the past, let me speak it into existence. In the past, there has been conflict within our own communities based on economic resources, based on skin color, hair texture, I mean, all the way around. And so it's nothing for me to go home and have someone say, oh yeah, you so bougie. And most people don't know what that means, especially if you're not Southern and are Black, but I'm aloof. I keep getting aloof. I'm just trying to be quiet so that I don't get in trouble or say anything. And as Gloria was talking, when you first started speaking, I thought, oh, I have to make sure that I talk with Gloria and we can get to speak some French together and do our thing. But we can't really be around and let people hear us, because suddenly when we're two Black women speaking French, it won't sound like French, it will sound like some language, and then we'll get you're in America, you gotta speak American. And that is a genuine fear, just sitting here during this call. So I think, going back to the original point, validating, listening, and joining is, especially with children, right off the bat. And as Gloria said, wow, that's hard. So what was that like for you? And what can I do for you? And are you okay? I'm done for now.
Rhonda, I just wanted to bring up this point that I unfortunately just learned today, which shows how much more I have to learn. But I was doing this perinatal training and they were talking about weathering, and it's a little bit like epigenetics. So like how Black health changes over time because of generational experiences. And for some reason, when you talked about breastfeeding, it made me think of it. But they said there's really good evidence to show that one of the reasons that Black women might have so much lower rates of breastfeeding and successful breastfeeding is because Black slaves were wet nurses And then it became this thing that you did not do with your own children. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that today. And I have chills again. Like I just got chilled, you know, but I was thinking about like the healthcare system and that's some internalized racism too, you know, just all these ways that generationally experiences impact health.
I
First,
think,
go ahead, Gloria. Go
I
ahead.
think the other thing that you need to remember too is that Black people for a long time weren't seen as people. And so there's been a lot of historical science experiments done on Black people that have questionable ethics. So I think of like, you know, the syphilis test with the Tuskegee Airmen, or I think of the notion where, you know, Black women don't feel pain, therefore like aren't offered pain medicine as much. So there's a lot of like historical parts of it where you're just like, there's just like an embedded distrust of like, will I be heard? Will I get adequate care? Will someone see me as just me and not making like a generational mistake per se on that experiences? And there's also the whole aspect where even when Black women were breastfeeding, then there was this whole formula is best thing that was, yeah, it was perpetuated into a lot of different communities, but it was particularly honed within the African American community and to those that could not access, you know, whatever, had lower economic standards. And so when they had these generations that were taught formula is best, when you try to then go back to breastfeeding, it's just, the context is not really there. And then you have the over-sexualization of Black women, where the breast's only purpose is to entertain men. So why would you want to perform something so sexual with your child, where it's really the opposite of it? So there's a lot of not letting women have control over their own bodies, especially not letting Black women have control over their own bodies, and kind of demeaning them when they do want to do something that is somewhat assertive and take these steps that are so, you know, wild. So I also home birthed both my kids that were also over 9 pounds, and it was just they were big, and so I just didn't, you know, really know, you know, anything otherwise. But it's really interesting to see the lens on which people really looked at, you know, home birthing, breastfeeding, just kind of being much more holistic approaches that I took, and whether or not that was supported not only within the communities that also practice this, which tend to sometimes not to have their own racial issues there, but also within the community that I identify with.
Yeah, there's just this comment about like fear of getting medical help, immune systems impacted.
For sure. And just the way it's with COVID, it's with heat, like with the disparities between access to cooling centers also tend to fall. There's a lot of things that you'll notice like fall on racial divides, you know, based on different things. And it can be social and economic is always the lens that I look through things. But it's just especially concerning with COVID, you know, this time and age where if you have someone who can't go to work, you know, or is working a job that can't be done digitally, you know, and their healthcare is tied to it, yet you're in a pandemic. So how do you navigate those areas? How do you even get to the point where someone's advocating for you and listening to your concerns? How do you not spread it? Like, it's just extremely difficult. And it's very, the approaches for COVID sometimes are very scientific per se. The information is a lot of times, like from a writing perspective, it's always in English. And we do have sign interpreters, but I really don't see a lot of information coming out in a lot of other languages, which is something that we should be doing as well. And I think it's important to see like, what is the lens that people are going through? Like, how can they not only advocate for themselves, but as a community, how do we approach this from a much more holistic approach? Because it really is a overall public health problem too, if we're not having people who feel comfortable getting tested, going out, having these symptoms, and yet they still have to be part of their community. Like we need to be to a point where our neighbors can reach out even if it's grocery shopping or, you know, them not feeling well or taking care of their children, like whatever. When Reading went through the car fire, I saw like what truly Reading is. It's we can respond to trauma by being a good neighbor. And we just have to continually use that muscle to all different types of neighbors that we have in our community. And just right now, we don't have a lot of people that feel empowered to be their whole selves and feel like they would be heard or respected within our community. And that's the actual major underlining problem. Like all people should be able to feel free to be themselves wherever they are in the world, but especially in our communities.
Gloria, people are asking for your contact information because you're so great. So whatever information you want to share. Oh, and they said they missed what you're the CEO of, which I kind of very brief.
That's totally fine. So I'm the CEO of a tech. This is so. I'm like, it seems so lame, but I'm a CEO of a tech company that deals with blockchain technology, which is the underlining of cryptocurrencies. So I deal with decentralization a lot. And my specific thing is a decentralization of education and how you do that. But I also, my company is called Shul. But I've also done a lot of work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in the tech world. And so when I went to the UN last year, that was what I was specifically speaking about. So, but I'll put my information in the chat. I'm a public person, so you can always reach me via Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or email. And I advocate for all oppressed groups. So if I seem extra spicy, like that's probably why.
It's a lot of advocating. Josie, do you have anything left to add?
No, actually, I mean, I did want to clarify that I'm only speaking from my own experience because I can't speak for the whole Black community. I can only speak for my own experience when it comes to my concerns about going to the hospital and my concerns about how people will treat my children based on how they look. You know, my oldest daughter, so my children are mixed as well. And my oldest daughter, she's dark skinned. She took more after me. My youngest is more passing, and my oldest is not treated very fairly at school, in public, and sometimes she dresses how she wants to dress, and I empower her to do that, but she likes baggier clothes, and so it's a constant concern for me that someone may racially profile her or think she's a boy, or any number of things, and so I have to be mindful as a parent about that, as you know, if I'm going into a hospital situation, which I know I'm just totally paranoid about COVID, so you don't even have to tell me, but I would have to be mindful about that if I went into a hospital situation, you know, how my children would be treated. And so all I can do is speak from my perspective, and you know, and just microaggressions are everywhere. The Copeland Center has a great webinar on microaggressions. I will get you that email address, and I'll be participating in it tomorrow. And it has been amazing. It's been one of those validations for me. So this is a validation for me. That webinar has been a validation for me. Will continue to be so. And even my supervisor validates me. I mean, you got to find it where you can find it, and and it's nice to have that, especially right now. You know, when emotions are still high. I know my emotions are high. I'm on guard. I don't trust anyone. You got a big flag hanging off the back of your truck. I'm going the other way. I'm go around that entirely. Even if we have clients that come into mental health and they are, and they look a little too, you know, rednecky-ish, or however you want to say that. If they look, I'm like, nope, it's no for me. Just because I don't at this point want to even put myself in a situation to be microly aggressed or just blatantly, you know, have something said to me. You know, my mental health is important, as everyone on this panel, as everyone on this call. Your mental health is important, and if I can protect myself in any way, or you know, have any sort of foresight, I will do that at work. I'll support myself there, and I'll support myself while I'm out and about in this community. So that's all I have to say.
I just want to say though this to the non-Black people in the room or those who are in the privileged group. I think it's important to really hear what we're all saying, because ideally, you know, Josie, Rhonda, and I, and even Eddie are saying like, you know, I have to protect myself. I have to protect myself. And these are the mindsets that we kind of carry with us, is this false, you know, things that what we do would be able to protect us from threats that are very real threats. But at the end of the day, when you look at the people who have been brutalized by the hand of police, like the people that, I mean, Philadelphia still was pulling out his wallet and had the license to carry in an open carry state, and he still died. Like, there's certain things where it's nothing that we do is ever really gonna save us, because our weapon is our skin. Like, what's weaponized against us is our skin. And so the more I can like let people know, like, this is what's really the reality of your Black clients, is like they have all these things that think that, you know, that we do, that we think is really going to help us and save us, and you know, that we can protect our kids with. You know, I always thought that I could protect my kids in some way from all of this, and if only I made sure that they wore the right thing or talked the right way. My children speak 3 languages. Like, they are as privileged as they can be. Yeah, I know as a mom, there's nothing I can do to protect them. Once they go outside this door, they're just a Black kid, you know, and whatever society's going to say to whatever they've gotten the situation happens, it's going to be, you know, well, they were probably doing something wrong, or that whole innocent till proven guilty is not something that is afforded to African Americans currently. And so I think it's just really important to hear all of this stuff that we carry with us. Like, your Black clients are carrying this whole mindset of, I got to protect myself. I got to protect my kids. I got to protect, you know, my family. I got to somehow change myself and not fully show up present in all ways, because it's not safe. It's not safe. And some of that, like, when you sit there and think clinically, that's someone who's manic, or someone who's, you know, has a psychotic episode, or someone who is in a state of panic or paranoia. But this is like all the time, right? You know, this is like our reality all the time. And there's not one single instant that I can think of relaxing, because I have to be on alert all the time. So when you start to think of people who are on alert at all moments of their life, at some point, they're going to have a mental episode, you know, and that mental episode might be snapping back because you asked a question that was, you know, frankly inappropriate. It might be snapping back because of being labeled or not being misunderstood. And so sometimes when you have that angry Black person myth, you have to kind of see beyond that and say, like, what is really going on? You know, like, what is really going on under that? They have the right to be angry. They have the right to be dismissive. They have the right to not tell you their trauma. They have the right to be holding it all in. Maybe they can't, like, for me, I get so wound that I can't even verbalize what's wrong with me. You have to be able to know me to be like, oh my God, she's in a state of true, like, if I'm having an anxiety attack, I will look calm, but I can't talk, I can't move, I can't do anything, and I can't call 911 because I can't talk. And you have to know me enough to unravel me enough so that I can actually say help, you know. And we're in a society that just doesn't expect Black women or Black people to say help, and when they do, we dismiss it, we punish it, we somehow attack. We say that their perspective is not correct. They don't know what they're talking about. And it's constantly bringing up more of the trauma. So you really have to be conscious about that, is like, does this person even have the tools to say help? And when they do, am I listening? Am I truly listening? And am I actively willing to remove whatever barriers need to be removed in order to bring them the most help possible?
Gloria, I can't even, but I feel like what you're describing is at its core being a trauma-informed. If I am a trauma-informed provider, then I see your trauma before I see aggression or manic behavior or anything else. I see trauma, you know, and that's truly what it means to be a trauma-informed provider. Is I am going to walk into any room thinking this person has probably experienced trauma, and what is it, and where is it, and how is trauma presenting itself, before I go ahead and diagnose some other kind of thing, you know?
And I think too, like now that I can look retrospectively and think of when I'm in trauma, the things that help right away, you know, of course, calming yourself down, but then it goes on to like life. Have they ate? Have they slept? Have they expressed themselves in some type of way that was even like helpful for them? For me, it happens with walking. If I can just at least like move, you know, and feel like, okay, this space is free, you know, that is helpful. But sometimes it's just that core part of it. And when I have a sister who had a mental episode, and when I look back at seeing what was the things that led up to her mental episode, lack of sleep, imbalanced nutrition, really not taking just hygienic care of herself. It was all of these things that just kind of fall apart. And when we're seeing this, you know, or maybe it's systematically been around them that way, it's like, how do you put that person whole enough as possible to even get them to the point where you can even recognize and say, you're going through trauma right now, you know? And sometimes when we have these huge traumas as a society, it's just the checking in, saying, what is your bandwidth? Do you have even bandwidth to hear me right now? Are you sleeping? You know, are you okay in general? And do you want to just vent? Do you want to just bitch it out and vent, or like journal it out? Just having the tools to get it out and saying like, this is a reality is helpful. Or just even saying like, no, what you're going through is true. Like, you are going through drama right now. There would be so many people that if you told different clients and from my community, like, yes, you're going through trauma right now, and I recognize it as trauma, you're not crazy. There's a huge majority of Black people that would sit there and say like, wow, that is something I've never even heard before. Because what's usually happened is, you're wrong, this is just you, maybe it's just your perspective, you know, but not that this is an actual trauma and it needs
Someone made a comment about that. I'm trying to find it. It's so far up. Who said that? Someone said a comment about as a therapist naming for a Black client that it was trauma, and the Black client said, no, this is just normal life. That's not trauma. I can't find the comment. Oh, I don't.
Right,
Michael Elterman said it.
Said it.
Yeah.
He said, oh, I don't look at it as trauma. I have had guns to my head from cops and all kinds of other things. That's just life.
And it is, and there's a certain degree, you know, my dad was a Vietnam vet. He has 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star, and he came back to North Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was still Jim Crow. And he has, I mean, they say that he was a different person before he went to Nam, but I remember being a little kid and being told, you know, at the dinner table, we're talking about school. Yeah, so such and such did this and such. Well, what grade did you get? Oh, I got blah, blah, blah. Well, was the other girl white? Yes. Well, that's why she got the better thing. And so you need to understand that is going to always happen. And I'm talking, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. And so on one hand, it sounds like a very racist statement, but on the other hand, you know, his PTSD was telling me, be careful, because you are different than them. And just because you are in this world does not mean that you are of this world. And so there's always a certain amount of protective energy that we have to keep up with, because if we turn on the news tonight, there will be a video of someone who was jogging down the street in their neighborhood and someone had something to say. Or, you know, going into a facility, someone having something to say and or do things. And it is scary at the same time. I think, especially for me personally, we didn't have to live a lot of what our parents went through. Although it is said, and this is, you know, tribal belief, the trauma goes 9 generations deep. We didn't have to live it. I've never gone to a place and had a sign saying, Rhonda, because of something about you, you can't come in. But the current events, I understand with a much, much deeper and wider breadth of what went on. recently we have a family text, and I was texting everybody, is everybody okay? There was riots going on and we're watching the news, you know, everybody check in. And my nieces who are college age, like, we're gonna go out and protest, and we're gonna this and that. And my brother and I are freaking out, no, don't do this. And my mother, who is usually like nervous Nelly and anxious about everything, was like, stay home. And we're like, okay, thanks. And she's like, stay home. There's nothing else you can do. And it took a minute for me to realize that a lot of her anxiety over my entire life has been because she has seen the things and experienced the things that we were only told about. And so seeing it come back around, it's like, so this is what you have to do. And so for a lot of us, it's like being at war constantly, but you can't actually say I'm at war, because in our society, first of all, you know, I get things like, well, you're so well put together. No, I'm not. You don't know what's happening here and here. But the perception, like Gloria was just saying, is, you know, Black women are not allowed to fall apart. We're not, even in Tyler Perry movies, we're not allowed to say, I need help with this. So I've had people ask me, you know, well, I don't know this and I don't know that. And I'm like, right this minute, right before all this blew up, I got attacked on Messenger by an ex-husband's friend. And the whole text started with, Rhonda, you fucking nigger, you blah, 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 blah. And it took me out. 3 days, I was out of it. And I think on so many levels, I think the hardest part about it was someone that I knew. And as Eddie said, someone that even though I've been divorced for 10 years, it was someone that I had trusted, who had been in my home. And so that's what you think of me, and all of the degrees I have, and, you know, pride in my children and pride in my lawn at my house, it was all wiped out instantly because that was said to me. And it took my beloved to say, you know, you're not any of those things. And then I was pissed off because for a moment I believed it, because it felt like he finally said what everybody else knew. And that's where, Gloria, as you're saying, that moment of trauma, that's where my head was. Well, obviously, this is what everybody's thinking. Now, I snapped right out of it. 3 days, though. And I'm really upset that I allowed this person free rent in my noggin. So then it was that was a Saturday night. That Monday was when George Floyd was murdered, and it's just snowballed from there. And so having people say, you know, hey, I really would like to talk about this, or that, I can't. I'm not ready yet. This is, you know, more than skin deep for us, if that makes sense. So I just want to thank the people who have allowed me to sit here and run off the mouth for so long, and even in my emotional state, I really appreciate you all being asked, and all of those who have listened. And I'm at Rhonda Therapy, Rhonda with an H, at gmail.com if people want to reach out. And I think that we'll have something get started from this discussion tonight. I think we will give birth to many things. I'm done talking.
I really hope so. I just want you guys to know we're an hour over and we have 17 people. No, we have 17 people still on the call. That's more than we've had at any Zoom CAMFT meeting so far. And we're an hour out. So clearly this is something that we need to talk about. People want to talk about. I just want to throw out one thing. You're getting love all in the comments. Seriously been so validating. I'm blessed to have been part of it. The Black Minds Matter training that CAMFT did put on, and it's still on their website. One of the things they kind of were talking about during the questions was, you know, this thing Eddie said about Black people don't go to therapy, they go to church. And they were talking about like healing circles and how that's kind of been a more sort of open and accepting place to sort of process pain. And I'm just so curious, like what would that look like here? And
yeah, so I want to just make a standpoint too, because I want people to understand. I was in a church kid, like growing up for a long time, but not everybody feels welcomed in church settings as well. So sometimes they need like non-traditional settings too, which can be these healing circles. I was invited to one by a colleague. They put like a meeting on my calendar, and then they're like, okay, well, this meeting can be one-on-one if you want to talk to me, but there's a healing circle and I want to give you the opportunity to go. So I carved this space for you. It's for people of color to go to it if you want to join it. And it was kind of great because the person who was leading the healing circle, she had left space for people of color, where it was just like, if you wanted to have a people of color like one-on-ones, you can have that, or you could join within like the other greater discussion and just kind of pick and choose. And those have been very helpful because it's space where you can be fully authentic and without judgment. Like there's very few places where you can be a Black person without some type of judgment coming at you. And it's the same for like LGBTQ, like there's just a few of those areas. So sometimes it's giving tools, you know, breathing tools, a word, a mantra to hold on to, just having time to like not be on edge and trying to bring yourself down is extremely helpful. And being able to have the space where you can shed a tear, where you can share laughter, or really share your experiences without any type of judgment associated with it, has been extremely helpful, at least for me personally. So I try to really carve out time in that way. But it also can be allowing experiences where traditionally Black people weren't allowed to do. So, I mean, as crazy as it seems, it's a hike, you know, like those type of accesses have not been accessible to Black people, or have been not associated with Black communities. It's surfing, you know, surfing and chilling out on the beach. It can be taking, for me, CBD bath and actually having someone draw a bath for me. Like those little teeny tiny things are ways that you can really bring small bits of healing, especially when you're going through trauma. It can be having multicultural dolls at your home, or books at your home, even though your family itself is not multicultural. It can be having all different types of art, or joining into a movie. I had a coach, she's coached me as a weightlifter. She's 50 years old. She'd never seen the color purple, you know, and I was like, that's a standard in my life. So it just can be like creating space to have conversations and doing work. Like, as much as I would love for everyone to create healthy spaces in their environment, I would actually love it more if they were allies who would take on the fight, so I don't have to fight in every comment section of my first Facebook post, and also people who weren't perpetuating that trauma too. So again, like Rhonda had said, it's the hardest, the racism that I have to face with the militias, as scary as that seems sometimes. I don't know them. I don't know them personally. They're not holding a gun when they're in my house, you know? So that part of it doesn't bother me. What really bothers me are the friends that I've had for 35 years who've seen me grow up and still hold racist views to me myself. And that is something that's different. Yeah, it's something that's extremely difficult, you know, to have, is like, you've known me, you've known all the work that I've done, and yet you still have these, you know, bigoted mindsets or these racist mindsets. And so it's extremely difficult to really have someone that close. It's much more painful, you know. It's like being cut with a dagger versus cut with a razor blade, you know. It's like the closer someone is, the deeper the wound it is. So create your spaces in whatever ways you can. You can definitely diversify and create a sense of belonging, but you know, you're going to have to actively put in a lot of work. There's not just one solution in saying like, well, if you know, put a picture of Black Jesus in your room instead of the white Jesus, then everybody would feel much more comfortable. But it's like, if you could just kind of express make a safe space for people in whatever way that you can, and realize that you'll make mistakes. Like, we all make mistakes through our journeys, but it's important that we, you know, practice whatever type of forgiveness we can with selves and others, and do better next time we move forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking that much time. I really appreciate you guys so much. Any last comments? What else do you want to say? We've gone over an hour, just keep going.
Shauna,
Yes.
so, I'm sitting here thinking, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, there's a lot of conversations of like-minded people like us going on all this week and probably next week and the next month. But where do we go from here? This is the thing, My personal goal is to keep growing the beloved community and having so many people that have all these gifts of the head, heart, and the hand that anybody can come to the beloved community and get help, get exposed to some of these services that they need. That's one of the personal things that I like to see it happen. And I think it's going to happen. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to happen. Also, I was thinking about, actually, my wife brought this up, about law enforcement, trust with law enforcement, but actually having a mental health or a MFT available when they go out on a call. And looking at having that trained person with the police that they know how to de-escalate even better than the police have been trained to do. That type of stuff,
Yeah, I mean, I know that's some of the push, and I had a lot more experiences of that when I was down in the Antelope Valley. I did all foster and adopt, like really high-risk kids for 8 years. And sometimes I would have to like use the trust that law enforcement had with me, and then like the trust that my client had in me to step in the middle. I had the police called on clients multiple times, small children who were like, tantruming or like out of control. And sometimes I had to step into that space of like, okay, that client doesn't trust the police and the police clearly do not trust them. And like, what does that look like? I think sometimes mental health can be a bridge. They can be that middle spot where they, hopefully we've earned trust enough. Hopefully we've earned trust enough. So yeah, I appreciate the beloved community so much. And where do we go from here? I don't know. I just wanted to say, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I showed up. I showed up for a rally, and then I was like, well, I'm going to find out who put on that rally. And then I don't know about Eddie, but I was like, oh, beloved community. And then, and I just looked, and then I was kind of felt weird about it, but I just emailed Eddie and I said, like, I'm a therapist in town. What can I do? And then Eddie said,
yeah.
And then I went to a board meeting and they said, do this Juneteenth thing. And then, and so sometimes if you just are brave and take a step, like maybe it might happen.
I'm the worst person to ask what can you do, because I think big and I like have no limitations. I just like, we should do this and this and this and this. So I am a person who like would love to see, if every school knew who the Black therapists were, the people who have gone through like the trainings maybe that could deal with different types of, communities, that would be a great resource for the community to have. I would love to, I don't know how you can do it with COVID, but to have a day where it's like, all right, Black mental health matters. So instead of a protest, we're going to have a sit-in. Here's a chair. Here are, health professionals come talk and, have that opportunity that dispels some of these myths around. Maybe having resources to the schools. My school constantly was asking about what is a microaggression? Like, how can that be impactful to different types of students, and like maybe verbiages that we hear currently that we should be kind of like even affirmations. Could we get a list of 20 Black affirmations that would be beneficial for kids to be able to utilize, or for people to be utilizing for these students, that would be really impactful beyond like, you're so pretty, which, I'm like old grandma style. Like if I see a Black kid out, I will tell them they're gorgeous and they're beautiful, just because society doesn't tell them in general, but there's so many resources and things that you're all the psychiatrists and the, people that have that background. But, I took like 2 semesters of psychology, so I'm no way an expert of it, but the studies that always impacted me were like the doll test, you know, and the Dr. Zimbago prison experiment between the haves and the have-nots. And so when you start to really think about some of the impacting that we have to do from a psychological perspective, it's like, y'all have the tools to rebuild that. How do we do that? What is needed in order to make sure that happens? Is it images? Do we need to have images of great, beautiful Black people in our community with positive affirmations so that people know that they're here and they're bright and they're intelligent, and that the kids here can grow up to be these people, and that we expect as our community great things to come from these great people? Like, what are the ways that we can reverse some of the narratives that are around some of the children and some of the people around them? And then how do you advocate, you know? So if you're dealing with foster and youth, I watched, I can't remember what, it was the Marky Mark movie about family and adoption, and we had all watched it. I thought that was great. There's a great documentary about transracial adoptions in Utah and how people had to kind of address their own white privilege when dealing with Black children and what that brought up. And so some of these conversations can be community conversations. It can be, let's watch this movie and talk about it. What are the tools, you know, that we can give back to the community to build these people up? Or de-escalation techniques. Like, what is de-escalation? We're all talking about it in police context, but what could we really do that would benefit how we deal with each other, you know, and making it a safe space in general for people? Why do people need safe spaces? What does that mean? Like, some of these lenses are something that psychologists already talk about, but it's just like normalizing it, you know? Why is mental health important? Why should we care about people's mental health if it's different from me? Like, those are conversations that y'all can lead because you lead them, you know, and that I think the community would benefit from, especially our community. Like, if we advocated for more resources for trauma in so many different levels for our community, because I know that Black people are experiencing trauma, but like, all of Reading went through the car fire and none of us have like trauma that's like addressed to it from a society level, you know? And I feel like we should really be addressing some of that trauma that we went through as a whole community. And maybe that's the lens that we get some resources back towards everybody else. But our community is so different from like Orange County that didn't have to go through this massive trauma as a collective unit. And we really know what it is like to have collective trauma. And now we have collective trauma in another dynamic of racial people, you know? And so I think that we'd be able to really, pulling in resources and having this conversation would benefit the community as a whole, because we'd be giving tools back to our community on how to deal with, you know, trauma.
People
Yeah,
are
I mean, outdoors or Zoom calls, or like, you know, it doesn't have to be.
trying to figure out how to do this more.
I know.
And
And
we
I
also,
don't mind Zoom call.
we also need to look at the multicultural aspects, because we live in an area, as Yuvia said, that is very rich in the Latino culture, the Asian culture. I mean, you know, I've had family come here and they're like, there's no Filipinos. I'm like, oh yeah, there are. You just have to,
You gotta know where to go.
you have to know where to go, because you know I'm gonna go to town, I'm gonna find the lumpia, right? And I am going to find the pho, because that's what we do as a culture, is we reach out and find out who is around us. And it's also about allies and resources. But I think a multicultural approach in lots of aspects lets other people know, you know, we are here. And I may not speak Spanish, but I know Yuvia, and I know that I can text her, and that, you know, enough Spanish, I can get food and I can find a toilet. But I know that I can get a hold of Yuvia and she will give me this resource or that resource. I now know that I can get in touch with Josie for certain things, and having a community, as Gloria said, getting the word out that, hey, in this community, we have A, B, and C. The only advertising I do is on Psychology Today. And the big reason for that is because my picture is there. And when someone looks me up, they know exactly what they're getting, because that is a fear and concern. But also that tells me that, having seen my picture, you chose me. And a lot of times it's you know, you do this and this and this, and I'm into that. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're actually coming to me for my knowledge and my skill set. And, you know, understanding that that's where some of us start, making that leap forward. If there's some place to go, then we would go. So it's up to us actually to provide that. So I'm in.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I also think that, like, it's interesting, you know, everything's a spectrum, it's a spread. So like for me, I was not raised around a lot of Black people, again, just nature of where I was raised, but I was raised around a lot of Latino people, and Spanish was my first language, and then French, and then German, and then English. And then it was interesting to me that when I had to go back to communities that I needed to feel safe with, it was an allyship that I had within the Latino community, because they were also oppressed by race per se too. And so we were also in these like networks. And so it's important to recognize that sometimes when you do some of the community work, that there are other communities that you might also be lifting up at the same time that can benefit from it. And it's also important not to just pinpoint, you know, some of the problems within one community and say that these problems don't also happen within the other communities as well. So I think that when you look at it systematically, it's like, how can we lift all people up, or how can we be allies to all these different communities? I'm a daughter of an immigrant. My mom worked for 25 years to get her status, and so I understand the importance that the way it affected her, and on a deep level too. She also was facing deportation, you know, and I had to experience that as a young child. And so some of these things are extremely traumatic, you know, and that there's a multiple different communities that are affected from it. So it's like, can we use some of the tools and resources that we've had or experiences to benefit maybe people that don't look like us, but also are still still need to be pushed forward and to have equality at the same time, and the ways to do about that. So I just want to make sure, like, whatever systems that we have, it's important that those communities feel like their voices are heard, that they deserve to be amplified, that they deserve to be recognized, as well as have a place of belonging within our community too.
I mean, I just think, like, we're marriage and family therapists. Like, we know systems. Systems is what we learn. That's the whole thing. You know, we absolutely understand systems, and how when one piece of a system is broken, the whole system is dysfunctional. You know, like, we're just so well positioned to address this, I think. We also have to do a whole new panel because Yuvia told me that her family marched with Cesar Chavez, and I was like, what? So now I have to do a whole new panel.
So, Luvia, I learned, I had to work with a project that's called Gear Up in East Los Angeles. So I learned how to teach College Prep by Jaime Escalantes from Hamilton. It's the guy who did Stand By Me. So like, I don't understand what it is to be Latino, but I understand the importance of Latino culture to Latino children. And I've worked in East LA and San Ysidro, south of the border, getting students that cross the border every day for education, getting them to college was like for 10 years I did that. Plus my family, my other half of my family is like, it's literally Spanish. All get-togethers are in Spanish for our family's household. So it's like, I think that there's a lot of people that we could just join forces in bringing some of these like realities to.
Yes, I think, you know, one of the things that, Eddie, to answer your question as well is, and then also Shauna, is yes, we do understand systems. And the one thing that, for me, what has been really important is to get in the system, because when you're in the system, you can also change it within, you know, the inside. And again, you know, also educating people on the importance of going and voting for someone who is an ally.
Amen.
And, you know, for me, since I became a U.S. citizen, I have not missed, you know, one election. Why? Is because I understand the importance of my vote and how my vote is oftentimes a minority and in this huge system. So
definitely changing the system and making my voice heard, you know, one vote at a time, and joining groups. You know, we are oftentimes, well, we grow up not seeing, positive, role models that, share part of our culture. And so when we are the ones, leading that for others, it's even more important to say, okay, yes, I may be a minority, but I'm not handicapped in any way. Just because maybe I speak with an accent does not mean that I think with an accent. And I am, it's going to be tough, but to continue to also be that role model for the youth, because I have to tell you, I am really proud of the youth and how they're the ones that are slowly showing their faces and trying to make a difference. But it's up to us to also support our youth and say, yeah, we hear you, and let's keep it up, and let's get out there and vote.
Yeah, the great part about this youth, so I was at the courthouse, their march, and this youth is passionate. They won't take no for an answer. They don't go with any of the BS. They just want a lot of systematic change. And I'm extremely encouraged by what I see there. Sometimes I go about it in different ways, and I'm like, man, I wish that I had the leadership opportunities. I wish that the community here had the same things that I had growing up as far as leadership and opportunities and access. And I work very hard to advocate for them to get that, or somehow bring it to these communities. But this youth, the children are the future saying, is this youth is extremely well organized. They can bring things into existence. They do not like inequality at any type of way, and what they see is wrong is wrong. They're definitely much more willing to push it forward. But I also think, what you said, Yuvia, was who in our public system advocates for the most marginalized groups. I had asked my colleagues that the other day, of which ones are our city leaders, how do we know that they're getting advocated for? And it just doesn't happen at a system level, and we need to make sure that we hold our leaders accountable for that, because part of being a good leader is for being able to see the whole spectrum and say, how do I move everybody forward in the most efficient way? And it's just not happening in a lot of different communities. And I personally feel very disheartened to even know that I know it's the reality, but I feel sad that there's people who feel like they can't use their voice, or in whatever language that they need to, and whatever means they need to. I want all people to feel like they have a right to use their voice and to be heard. And until we get to the point where they themselves feel that, we need to eradicate all barriers that are hindering them.
Well said.
All right, you guys, I think I gotta call it.
Yeah, I gotta go to the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom for an hour.
There are so many resources embedded in here, and so I'm gonna try to pull. Andrew left some resources in here. Josie, he found the one that you were talking about and put the link in here. Yeah.
Donna, if you tap on those 3 dots at the bottom, it'll say save chat.
Woo.
You can save chat as a file.
Okay.
Download the file and then send that file. I'm telling you, the tech nerd, she knows how to do it.
I was gonna I was like, I just won't X out. Okay.
Just save the chat, and then you can at least highlight the resources.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to pull those resources out, and then either I will find a way to get them to everyone, or you can email me personally, or email us at our info at, oh wait, what's our CAMFT? Anyway, I'm gonna put them both here. I'm gonna put mine here, and I can also just get them to you. So that's me. Just email me. I can't remember what our CAMFT email is. And then, cause there's good stuff all through here in terms of extra resources. Okay, so I've saved the chat. Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it so much. I agree with people that we probably need to do a full day on this at some point. So I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Oh, and putting together a workshop, there's 3, 4, 5 of us who do that and public speaking. So we've got this on point. We just need to figure out how to get together. And Josie, I sent you a friend request. I got to go eat, and I'm sorry for cutting you off on ending, but
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Let me know how I can help you guys. If you figure it out, I will help.
All right, sounds good. We'll put together something.
All right, guys. Thank you so
Good job.
much. Have a great
All right. Bye.